Now she's going online, going back and forth with Caitlin Clark fans, and she's subliminally still going on with a verbal assault against Caitlin Clark and her fan base. Bro, this whole thing is getting bad. And as of right now, to me, from the outside looking in, the WNBA has to do something.
This is no longer a basketball story. The moment that ball went through the net from 33 feet, the moment Clark walked directly into Tiffany Hayes' face and said what she said, the moment Hayes walked off that court having lost by 8 points after spending an entire game trying to physically disrupt the most dangerous player in women's basketball. That was basketball. What happened in the hours after that game on social media is something completely different. Something that the WNBA's legal department, its broadcast partners, its corporate sponsors, and its league office cannot treat as a basketball matter, because it is not one. A verified professional athlete with a significant public platform chose to respond to a message, a publicly archived, documented message, that explicitly described the coordination of physical harm against a named individual outside the basketball court. Not aggressive play, not trash talk, not competitive animosity expressed through the game. Physical harm, off the court, described in plain language. And Tiffany Hayes responded to it with one word and a laughing emoji. Real. That one-word response from a verified WNBA professional to content describing premeditated violence against a named contemporary is now a documented public record. It cannot be unposted. It cannot be blocked away. And it cannot be treated by this league as equivalent to a coaching staff press conference comment about officiating. Drop your honest reaction in the comments right now. Do you believe the WNBA is obligated to formally respond to this situation before the next scheduled game between these two franchises? Because what I am about to show you changes everything about how you understand the institutional priorities of this league. Let us establish the factual sequence with complete analytical precision, because the documented record matters here in a way that goes far beyond social media drama or competitive sports rivalry. During Indiana Fever's 90-82 victory over the Golden State Valkyries, Hayes engaged in a documented physical and psychological confrontation with Clark throughout the game. She was part of a defensive scheme specifically designed to disrupt Clark's rhythm through constant physical contact at every single catch. Clark's response was a 33-foot logo 3 followed by direct verbal engagement. Hayes' shooting efficiency declined in the second half. The Valkyries lost by 8 points. These are documented box score facts. What happened after the final buzzer is where the institutional question begins.
I talk ish because you're never on my teams, but I'm always ready to support you or crash out. LOL, that's fair. Your composure was so much better than mine. I would have been, I tell you that. My growth is a gift and a curse, but mostly a gift. What were we ready to take up collections if they tried to find you and everything, my peeps? What the hell? Someone say, listen, I got some cousins we don't speak about that will ride at dawn upon request. Just let me know. Tiffany Hayes says, that's real? What the fuck?
In the hours following the game, Hayes engaged with content in her social media mentions that included messages using language describing off-court physical conduct directed at Clark. One specific exchange, the exchange that defines the precise legal and institutional threshold of this situation, involved a fan posting a message explicitly offering to mobilize family members to commit physical harm against Clark outside the basketball context. The phrasing described individuals being available at dawn upon request. The message was not a basketball metaphor. It was not competitive trash talk. It described the premeditated coordination of physical harm against a named person in her private life away from the court. Hayes' documented response to that specific message was a single word, real, accompanied by an emoji communicating amusement. Subscribe right now because the institutional analysis of that one-word response is the part of this story that every WNBA broadcast partner, every corporate sponsor, and every legal advisor connected to this league needs to understand completely. What Hayes did in documented and publicly archived form was provide an affirmative public response to content that explicitly described the coordination of off-court physical violence against a named individual. She did not report the content. She did not condemn it. She did not clarify that she found it inappropriate or dangerous. She replied with language that communicated endorsement and amusement. That is the documented record. That is what exists in the public archive regardless of what subsequent actions she takes to distance herself from it. And here is the specific context that makes this situation materially different from a generic social media dispute between athletes. Caitlin Clark is not an abstract public figure in this context. She is a documented target of prior stalking incidents that have already involved law enforcement intervention. Her personal security has a documented history. When a verified professional athlete with platform visibility responds affirmatively to content describing coordinated physical harm to someone with that specific documented history, the endorsement does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in an information environment accessible to individuals who may already be motivated to act on it. This is a corporate conduct matter. This is a legal liability matter. This is a personal player safety matter.
Like, look at the amount of hate that is coming out. Now, this is the post right here that I'm guessing people were saying, bruh, this is a little too much. Listen, I got some cousins. We don't speak about that. We'll ride at dawn upon request. Just let me know. That's real. Laughing emoji. My goodness.
And it requires institutional response at the level of seriousness those categories demand. Now let us talk about the consistency question, because this is where the WNBA's institutional credibility becomes directly measurable against its own documented enforcement record. In the same 7-day period that produced this situation, the league issued a documented fine against Stephanie White for public statements criticizing officiating. That enforcement action was executed swiftly. The institutional message was clear. Public criticism of officiating produces financial consequences for coaching personnel. The league now faces a situation where a verified player publicly engaged with content describing off-court physical violence against a named contemporary in a manner that constituted affirmative endorsement. These two situations are not equivalent in their nature. One involves officiating criticism. One involves conduct with direct personal safety implications for a player who already has a documented stalking history involving law enforcement. That non-equivalence makes the consistency question more significant, not less. If the league's enforcement apparatus responds to officiating criticism faster and more visibly than it responds to a player's public endorsement of content describing physical harm to another player, the institutional priority signal that sends is not a sustainable one. Not for an organization managing relationships with broadcast partners who paid $3 billion specifically for the professional credibility this league promised to deliver. The Golden State Valkyries organization now carries a specific and non-deferrable institutional obligation. They employ the individual whose documented public conduct has created a security context for an upcoming game against the Indiana Fever. The security planning requirements for the next Fever Valkyries matchup have been materially affected by that conduct. That is not an abstract reputational concern. It is an operational and legal reality that the organization's security staff, legal counsel, and front office are required to address before the next scheduled meeting between these franchises. The subsequent conduct Hayes engaged in mass blocking of accounts that documented and criticized her engagement with the threatening content does not constitute accountability. It constitutes the digital insulation of an individual who recognized that her conduct had produced consequences she wished to avoid without addressing the conduct itself. Blocking critics is not accountability. It is the absence of it.
Tiffany Hayes is liking posts about violence against Caitlin Clark. If nothing is done and something happens, Caitlin Clark will sue and own this league if you don't protect her, bro. Fans is pissed. Fans is pissed about this, bro. I just cannot believe, like, what in her right mind will possess her to get online and agree with somebody attacking Caitlin Clark? This is beyond me.
The corrective path for the league office is analytically clear. A documented formal response proportionate to the specific nature of the conduct, communicated publicly and implemented before the next scheduled game between these franchises, is the minimum response consistent with the league's obligations to player safety, corporate partner confidence, and institutional credibility. For Hayes individually, the professional path requires a substantive, specific public acknowledgement that the content she engaged with was inappropriate. that her response to it was wrong, and that she understands why it produced the institutional and public response it did. Delivered without deflection. Delivered without continued blocking of those who documented it. That does not resolve the league's institutional obligation to respond formally, but it is the necessary beginning of the personal accountability process that her conduct has made necessary. The WNBA is in a period of rapid commercial expansion. New franchises, new broadcast deals, new sponsorship relationships, new wagering partnerships, all of which are predicated on the league being perceived and administered as a serious professionally managed organization. The institutional infrastructure that supports that perception needs to be commensurate with the commercial scale the league is now operating at. The gap between the league's commercial ambitions and the behavioral infrastructure that supports them is the structural condition that makes situations like this one possible. And closing that gap is not optional. Drop your most analytically grounded assessment in the comments right now. Does Hayes' documented engagement with content describing off-court physical harm to Clark constitute conduct the league is institutionally obligated to address formally? And does the comparative timeline of the league's response to this situation versus its response to White's officiating criticism tell you something specific about the WNBA's actual enforcement priorities? Subscribe immediately and activate notifications because this situation is developing in real time, and we are going to document every single institutional response as it happens.